You have now performed visual inspections and functional tests to determine if there is an external or internal leak. If the tests you have just performed point to leaks in the master cylinder, its components, or seals, you will need to replace the master cylinder. Additionally, if there is contaminated fluid present, it can corrode the components, which will also require a replacement. Fluid may be contaminated with excessive amounts of copper or a mineral-based substance. You can generally tell if there is a mineral-based contamination because the rubber components swell. The first step in replacing the master cylinder is to remove it. Follow the steps on the following screens to learn how to remove the master cylinder from the vehicle. Make sure the negative battery cable has been disconnected. Exhaust the vacuum booster by stepping on the brakes several times. Clean the area around the master cylinder with a towel to keep grease and debris from entering the lines once they are disconnected. If the vehicle is equipped with a fluid level sensor, disconnect the electrical connector. Put a container or absorbent cloth under the master cylinder before disconnecting the lines. Then, disconnect the line connections from the master cylinder using a flare nut wrench, also called a line wrench. Plug the lines as you remove them. Be careful to not get brake fluid on the vehicle finish, as the fluid will damage the finish. Remove the nuts holding the master cylinder to the vacuum booster, if it is equipped with power brakes. Remove the master cylinder from the booster. Note that you may need to remove other components before removing the master cylinder. These components include the proportioning valve, pressure warning or fluid level switch connector, and, on vehicles with manual brakes, the brake pedal push rod. Finally, use a towel to wipe any grease or debris from the vacuum booster and master cylinder. You may need to remove the master cylinder reservoir from the old master cylinder to transfer it to the new one. Be sure to empty the reservoir before removing it from the master cylinder. To remove it, place the master cylinder body flange securely in a vise. If there is a fastener or roll pin, remove it. Using a small pry bar, pull the reservoir away from the master cylinder. Remove and discard the grommets. Inspect the reservoir for any damage. Discard if there are cracks, deformities, or other damage. If the reservoir is serviceable, you will need to clean it. First, using a clean towel and alcohol, wipe down the reservoir and remove any grease and debris. Dry with compressed air. Then lubricate the new grommets and the bayonets with new brake fluid. Now you are ready to install the reservoir on the new master cylinder. Place the reservoir on a hard surface. Insert the bayonets of the master cylinder into the reservoir at an angle. Using a rocking and pushing motion, work the master cylinder body onto the reservoir. Reinstall fasteners or roll pins if equipped. Before installing a new master cylinder, it needs to be bench bled to remove any air inside. This will help prevent air from entering the brake lines. There are several techniques that can be used to bench bleed the master cylinder. We will cover the most common technique. Place the master cylinder in a vise with the bore positioned horizontally. Clamp to its mounting lug if possible, and never clamp it by the bore. Using a bench bleeding kit, install the correct fittings into the outlet ports. Then fill the reservoir with new brake fluid. Connect one end of the tubing to the fittings in the outlet ports. Place the other end of the tubing into the reservoir. Using a dowel or Phillips head screwdriver, slowly push the pistons 3/4 of the way into the bore. You will see bubbles emerge from the tubes. Slowly release the pistons and repeat the process until all air bubbles have been removed. You may need to gently tap the master cylinder to dislodge trapped bubbles. Note that you have to wait 15 seconds between strokes when pushing in the piston on a quick take-up master cylinder. Refer to the manufacturer's service information for further details. Remove the bench bleeding kit and immediately plug the outlet ports. Keep the ports plugged until you install the master cylinder.
After bleeding the master cylinder, it can be installed. Select each tab for more information. When finished, select Next to continue.
Place the master cylinder on the vacuum booster studs. Attach the nuts and tighten to manufacturer's specifications. Unplug the outlet ports and securely attach the lines using a flare nut wrench. If the vehicle is equipped with a brake fluid level sensor, reconnect the electrical connector. Then reconnect the negative battery cable.
You should also bleed the master cylinder once it is on the vehicle to remove any air bubbles that are remaining in the outlet ports. Be aware that some master cylinders have bleeder screws. Check the manufacturer's service information for instructions on how to bleed a master cylinder with bleeder screws. Select each tab for more information. When finished, select Next to continue.
Step on the brake pedal several times to exhaust the vacuum booster. Place a container or absorbent cloth under the master cylinder to catch any brake fluid that leaks. Top off the master cylinder reservoir with new brake fluid if needed. Then reinstall the cap. You need to make sure that the reservoir is at least half full throughout this bleeding process. Have another technician step on the brake pedal several times and then hold it down. Loosen the highest or forwardmost fitting with a flare nut wrench. You will see air bubbles emerge from the fittings. While the other technician is holding pressure on the brake pedal, tighten the fitting. Again, it is important to not bottom out the pistons. Repeat the steps on this screen until no air escapes. When no air escapes from this fitting, repeat the entire process for the remaining fitting, starting with the highest and working towards the lowest. Make sure the fluid level does not completely drain. If this happens, air will be introduced back into the master cylinder. After bleeding the master cylinder on the vehicle, you may need to check the master cylinder push rod adjustment if it is adjustable. Lastly, you need to bleed the entire hydraulic system. We will cover bleeding the system later in this course.